The evolution of cybersecurity over the years has led to increased risks and the need for more comprehensive response mechanisms. From the global ransomware attacks that hit hundreds of systems to phishing and scanning rackets, at least one cybercrime was reported every 10 minutes in India in the first 6 months of 2017. According to one study, in 2016, India ranked 4th when it comes to online security breaches, accounting for over 5% of global threat detections. The cyber threat has also transcended to become a national security consideration, with several experts pointing to the digitization of weaponry and the role of cyber armies in launching attacks against rivals. This week, India Risk Report looks at cybersecurity in India, its impact on business, levels of preparedness and future trends.
Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report. And in this episode, we are specifically looking at the challenges of cybersecurity to both government and governmental infrastructure and institutions, as well as the big challenges that it poses to the economy through the damage that cyber attacks can do to the industry. We have with us two very well qualified and eminent experts. We have with us Ambassador Lata Reddy, who has been formerly our Deputy National Security Advisor, and I understand, ma'am, that you were one of the key people who formulated the National Security Doctrine on Cybersecurity, and currently you are the co-chair of the Global Commission on Stability in Cyberspace. And we have with us Mr. Ajay Goyal, who is formerly the MD of Simtac and at the same time now the managing partner of Color Tokens, a new initiative, but I'm sure you'll make it go from strength to strength. Madam, I would like you to throw a bit of light that when you formulated this whole blueprint for cybersecurity for India, there was a complaint, and the complaint was that not all stakeholders were taken into account to formulate that, and therefore some of the regular challenges that is faced outside government circles, particularly the industry, weren't addressed by this national security doctrine in the depth that it could have. Is that a correct criticism, or is that something that has just in some quarters?
I'd like to say that firstly, I'm a strong believer in what we call the multi-stakeholder system, which means that you have to bring in all stakeholders on board when you discuss any critical issue pertaining to national security. And simultaneously, while we were continuing the discussions on building the national security architecture within government, we also had a joint working group with the private sector. I'm not sure how well this was known, but we had representatives of private sector equal in number to the representatives from government, and we did take their views on board as well. Finally, obviously, the formulation of the cybersecurity policy was something largely directed by the government. And they brought a technical knowledge. Of course, we had very many technical experts within the government. We had Dr. Gulshan Rai, who was the director of the CERTIN at that time, and continues to guide our cyber policies even now. And you had people from the Ministry of IT and Telecom, which was a combined ministry.
It was a healthy mix of everybody, and finally the government put its stamp of approval on it.
As you know, the normal procedure is it would have to go to the National Security Council, it would have to go to the cabinet, there would have to be a cabinet decision before a policy can be made public.
But the good thing is that at least I think we can count ourselves proudly amongst a handful of countries that has a well-formulated doctrine in place,
yes,
which has met most people's expectations. Every aspect of security challenge to the economy has to be addressed, and cyber threats, to my mind, is pretty much a primary area of attention. But I want to take you from where Dr. Reddy has talked about, that what are the leading barriers to adopting a more active cybersecurity architecture for businesses, considering the fact that the government works in, if the government of India gives direction, all bodies of government of India have to follow it. Businesses are independent verticals. How do you all get everybody in the business world on the same page?
Yeah, my view, Maruk, is that the internet has, the adoption of internet has changed the way the business is done. And majority of the businesses now, you see, they, without an internet or a computer, it'll be very difficult to operate. Like the banks can't operate if the network is down, or the telecommunication companies or networks are down. And thus, securing internet and the way the security architectures is built currently is a layered approach to security. And that's the primary concern, because the security has become very reactive in nature. That means when a threat is discovered, then possible solutions are built, and those possible solutions are enforced. Industry has to adapt to a more proactive approach to the cybersecurity, and technology will play a very important role into that.
That's another important point raised. So according to various reports, India ranks consistently in the top 10 most vulnerable countries when it comes to cyber threats. I mean, I'm sure you would have seen reams and reams of reports as is often brought out. So how did you in the government seal yourself against the kind of constant attacks that would come to you? Are there lessons from what you did for the industry?
You know, I would say that basically you have to prioritize. You know, it's not possible to seal off all of cyberspace.
Absolutely.
You know, India is today the second largest user of internet in the world after China, you know, I think we've crossed 400 million. We're heading towards 500 million people. Now, if you say, can we put a system in place to protect each and every user of the internet, the answer would have to be no. But I think you have to prioritize and you have to concentrate on those areas. So what did the government do? We said critical information infrastructure, by which I mean the computer systems that control those parts of our infrastructure that are so crucial that a collapse of them would lead to serious national consequences for the economy and for security. So we said there should be a national center for the protection of critical information infrastructure. And that has been set up. Within NTRO, there's a NCIIPC, which does precisely that. And we said there should be a National Cyber Coordination Center. We said there should be a Chief Cybersecurity Coordinator for the whole country, who should be housed actually in the Prime Minister's office, in the National Security Council. And Dr. Gulshan Rai, whom I've mentioned before, has now taken over that post. So, you know, I think these kind of prioritization, defining key institutions that have to be built, defining key individuals who would have to do the job of monitoring the overall landscape of cyber threats and cyber security. These are the lessons which I think government learned. And these be translated into industry?
That is really the challenge that the industry faces, that while the government of India is all connected with a cord between all of them, that whichever body you are, you still are a government employee or a government servant. Industry has its advantages of being individual verticals, but could there be a core body for industry which could become a go-to body for everybody who wants advice, to be linked in, to get support? Because I understand attacks of any nature, whether terror attacks or cyber attacks, the most hard hit will be medium and small scale enterprises, because the big boys will somehow get out of it. And looking at that, is there room for some kind of a collective industry consensus, which the industry will run and the industry will set the benchmarks for, though engaging with the government but not monitored by the government?
Yes, Maruk, what I understand, if we talk to the CISOs, the Chief Security Information Officers of the industry, and they have a forum, they normally talk and collaborate, may not be that much enough, but I strongly believe that today if somebody else is attacked, tomorrow you can be attacked. So it has to be a collaborative effort to share best practices, what you have implemented, how the technology frameworks looks like, what the disciplined approach, what you have it.
So, so therefore, ma'am, what to sum up is essentially that the industry can cooperate, but I'm getting a feeling the industry still needs the government to hold its hand.
Not necessarily, Maruf, because if you look at industry, they do have associations, and the associations can play a big role. For instance, there's NASSCOM, you know, and NASSCOM is the National Association for all the people in the cyber world, all the industries in the cyber world. So NASSCOM in fact came forward to hold a task force on cybersecurity, where they looked specifically at the requirements of the industry and also how industry can cooperate with government. So I think that if institutions like NASSCOM are empowered and they have the Data Security Corporation of India within NASSCOM, again, which is there only to teach companies how to keep their data safe. What they need to be is to be more empowered, to be able to pass directives. And then, yes, there would have to be some kind of regulatory mechanism in place to tell people that if you do not follow certain directives, then we cannot take responsibility or come to your assistance when there is an attack.
And a thumb rule for averting future cyber catastrophes is to be a little more transparent with your earlier flaws so that others learn from your mistakes. But we'll be back after a break to look at some measures that the industry and rest of us can adopt, which can be proactive, and we don't need to be in a defensive reactive mode, and how the government and the private sector can work together. But that after a break. Welcome back. We continue to have our two distinguished guests with us, and we are looking at the challenges of cyber threats, how to handle cybersecurity issues, both at the level of the government and of the industry. Mr. Goel, you have at a recent conference in Bangalore just mentioned at the Synergia Conclave that there is the need to have proactive measures and not just remain reactive. Define that a little further for the industry.
Yeah, I said reactive means the current way of managing security is basically a layered approach of putting security measures on the existing environment. It is like strengthening the wall of a fort and keep on building bigger and bigger wall. If the wall is broken at some point, the fort is conquered. The similar way, the whole technology framework is very reactive and putting layered and layered of security approaches into that. And that may not be the right approach. Currently what happened if a malware is discovered or a virus is discovered today, and then a signature is created and enforced and all those, these are reactive measures. Can we make any proactive measures? One of the technology company I'm working with currently right now, they took a very different approach to this. Their basic thesis of invention was, if we can make the resource or the data not available to the rest of the world, only available to those sorts of people who are authorized or authenticated on this, and make the rest invisible from the rest of the world, then if you can't see it, you can't hack it. And that's a proactive way of looking at it. And this kind of cloud computing kind of work is very proactive in nature. And the second one, where I'm very closely working with, is an area of encrypted data processing. Today, the way the encryptions are done, and like you see, all your documents are encrypted. When you send a document to anyone, it's sent over an encrypted channel, and it's stored in an encrypted form. But the real thing happens when you fire a query on it and you want to do a search on the document. It has to be decrypted, put the query in place, and then re-encrypt it and back. And there where the vulnerability lies in. Can you create a mechanism by which the encryption is end-to-end? So that during the transit of the data, during the data at the rest, and during the data when it's processing, is completely encrypted. That's a proactive way of looking at things. It's an end-to-end encryption. And I'm very proud to say such work has been done in Bangalore. These are very unique, maybe one of its kind in the world. And what Lata talked about, that way the government should interact with industry and academic. So these new technologies are getting developed in a startup environments here. And they're all bright students coming from Indian Institute of Science or IITs and things of those kinds. And some of us are holding their hands. And they can be large corporations tomorrow. And that's the way these technology needs to be implemented. So on your question, proactive measures is largely driven from technology frameworks. Second is a disciplined approach.
Well, ma'am, lots of ideas there. Uh, I'd like you to sort of come in here and tell us that were some of these ideas deliberated upon by our establishment? I'm sure they were, and maybe some of them are in the realms of classified information, so you may not like to talk about it. But I think what I'm equally interested in, that how do we create our geek brigades? Because I've been reading, and one of the things the armed forces are working on, which goes somewhat against their grain, is, the armed forces people are of a particular mold. You have to look straight, you have to walk straight, and you have to do all those things. And therefore, they are also now open to creating these geek brigades where you get these bright young people and you keep them in military environment, but you don't impose military discipline on them because their mind is working at the next level. Is that something that we can look at nationally? Because somebody once said to me that if you don't tap that energy, you don't tap that expertise, it's going to leave your shores forever.
I agree. In fact, what I think is that it's part of the same conundrum. If you don't involve the private sector, if you don't involve academia, if you don't involve the geeks, as you call them, you're never going to get a complete solution. So there are different models followed in different countries. Other countries who are more open to private recruitment than perhaps our system is. Because I don't think it's just the military. I would say even in the civil service, there's a certain constraint about lateral entry and bringing in experts at certain levels and these worries about confidentiality. But I think if you can build models where we explore creating solutions, where you bring in the private sector in turn can engage these young, active minds and people, and you work out a security system by which people are thoroughly vetted. There's no reason why, even in the most sensitive areas. But I think if you try to say that everything will be done by permanent government employees, it's never going to happen.
True.
I think it has to be an amalgamation between academia, the public sector, the young, active people who are out there doing this work, and as well as government to tie the whole thing together. And I've seen some very workable models in other countries, so I'm pretty sure we will get there. The question is, will we get there fast enough?
No, but the workable models that you've seen, particularly now that you work in the global space, in areas regarding cybersecurity and space, is anybody willing to adopt those models? Is there a mechanism by which people like you, who still have expertise in the subject, can go back and provide a paper to the government and say, this is your model, create your team to absorb that?
Well, apart from myself or as a national, at a national level, at a global level as well, we are doing that exactly, because the Global Commission, which I mentioned to you on stability in cyberspace, and the previous Global Commission I served on, which was the Global Commission on Internet Governance, our reports are forwarded to governments, are presented formally, and our conclusions are there for people to see, that what do we recommend that should be done. At the national level as well, I think many of the think tanks in our country have got an excellent relationship with the government, and their deliberations, their reports are read with interest by people in government, because they can bring in a lot of technical researchers, and they have full-time academics working on these issues, which perhaps government doesn't have.
Right.
Maybe I can add a little bit more on that.
Sure,
What she said. If you really look, there are a lot of invention needs to happen in this space. It's a very forward-looking areas, and I believe those inventions are happening not in a private sector, in an organized private sector also. It is happening in the garages, happening in the startup world. It's happening in the institutions. And I'm a part of the ecosystem of the startup world, and I'm seeing young, bright engineers. They come with brilliant, brilliant ideas. What we need is support. Is the government needs to create a mechanism by which we can identify and handhold these guys. And then it can be large corporation coming out of India. And these are the sets of guys, if we don't support them, they will be overseas tomorrow.
Right. In fact, as a follow-up to what you've said, just a quick answer from you, that where do you think would lie immediately, let's not look 20 years from now, I mean, since everything is being reduced to 5 or 10 years, next 5 years, what are the key focus areas for the industry as a benchmark that this is the minimum you need to do to ensure that you're cyber safe?
One, so for to keeping it cyber safe, the first one is that current technologies, a discipline of managing these current technologies. And secondly, as an industry, what we need to do that, we need to continuously innovate. And what we need is mathematics. Cybersecurity is all about mathematics. It's all about algorithms. We need to really look, quantum computers are a couple of years from now. And there will be a paradigm shift in computing altogether. The amount of power quantum computers bring on the table into the people, the cybersecurity angle will be magnified multi-folds. And current algorithms and the current structures can be broken within hours to days to months. So we have to relook everything in the next 2 to 3 years or 5 years from now. Guys like in countries like India, we are very, very strong in mathematics. We should encourage lots of innovation in this space, mathematics inventions, and how can we really be a front end, a leader and driving the world in this space. And I'm seeing currently right now, I'm involved with 7 or 8 companies in this space right now in Bangalore and other parts of the country. And I'm seeing fantastic encouragement. The kind of work these guys are doing, they need a tremendous amount of encouragement and response from the government so that they can be the beacon in these areas.
Any ideas which can further strengthen government and industry partnerships?
Well, I think basically, we have to overcome a very big conundrum where it comes to government and industry. One is that our own Indian industry has to step up and become thought leaders and start participating in policy dialogues, which is not happening at the moment. Every major conference in India, you would see that it is one of the multinationals that is there on the stage voicing their views. We have to find a way to bring industry in. The second thing is government has to find a way to create a small group of trusted companies who can be given sensitive developmental work on creating cybersecurity products, helping us with the encryption, which you mentioned, Ajay. And that can only happen if we move away from the sort of universal tender and having to accept the lowest tender conundrum which we are faced with.
True. So quite clearly, there are many challenges, but we are aware of it. We are seized of the matter, and I'm sure happier days in government-industry interaction lie ahead, and in which both can work towards achieving a national purpose. Thank you very much for being with us on this show. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.